I literally look like someone has rubbed a balloon all over my head. I am fully aware of that, but I just don't want to redo my hair. We're going for the frizzy look today. I also like to wear my glasses when I'm talking about the more academic side of things. But basically, welcome to today's video. As you guys may know, I have literally just finished my master's at UCL. So I have studied for a year as a master's student towards my cancer MSc, and now that I have completed my degree, I have done my full year, which has gone like so fast. I thought I would sit down and give you guys a full review of my time as an online university student at UCL, because I did not step foot inside UCL once. I mean, I haven't really officially got my degree yet because I haven't got my final grade, and we graduate, we have like a ceremony next year, I believe. But I wanted to film this video, you know, so that everything is still fresh in my mind. In the kind of like second part of this video, I also kind of want to try and compare. I say compare in inverted commas because it's going to be very difficult to compare, but I want to try and draw comparisons between my time at UCL and my time spent at Cambridge, because if you didn't know, I basically went to Cambridge for 3 years. I did biological natural sciences. However, it is so difficult to compare both of my degrees because they differ in duration. My undergraduate was 3 years, my master's was 1 year. They differ in like the degree itself. I did natural sciences, I did cancer as my master's. One's very specialized, one's not as specialized, and then, you know, one's an undergraduate, one's a master's. I obviously studied in Cambridge when I did my undergraduate, like I was living in the city for 3 years, and then with my master's, as I said, like I was at home. So it is virtually impossible to make comparisons. However, I am just going to contrast the two and talk about them both side by side because I thought it would be interesting to do that. But just take it with a pinch of salt. I really hope this video is useful, informative if you guys are thinking about applying to either UCL or Cambridge, or maybe both, I don't know. But yeah, I really hope you enjoyed this video. As usual, give it a thumbs up. Comment down below if you have any questions or anything, and subscribe if you are new and you want to stick around. Before we get into it, I'm just going to shout it out here because I'm going to shout it out in most of my videos at the moment. I am running the marathon on the 3rd of October. This video will be going up before that. You know, we're coming up to a week before the race. If you guys do want to sponsor me, my fundraising page is linked down below. This first bit of the video is basically going to focus on UCL because I have already spoken to you guys about my first term, and I feel like I need to talk about my second and my third terms. But yeah, let's start with my second term then. This is when I chose an optional module, so we had a choice of 2, and I did behavioural science in cancer as opposed to cancer clinical trials, looking at kind of like lifestyle factors that influence cancer risk. And you know, it talks about like prevention and all this stuff. I found it really interesting because I like wrote essays on tobacco and cancer, on diet and cancer actually, which was really cool. We had some really quite rogue lectures in that. We had one on like singing in cancer, how like singing is used to help cancer patients. There is literature about that stuff, which is really quite cool and just, you know, very niche. And the way we were assessed for that, we had to answer 3 questions, and we had to like write answers that were only, how long, like 750 words or something, which is a tiny amount. As much as I didn't like that because I felt like I didn't have enough words to say everything, I definitely feel like it challenged me to write very concisely and, you know, take the very key messages and drill those home. And then alongside, we were doing the module that I was actually really looking forward to. This was the cancer immunology and immunotherapy module. Obviously, I had done a lot of immunology as part of my undergraduate, so I did pathology or biology of disease in my second year at Cambridge, and then I also specialised in immunology in my 3rd year. So yeah, I did have quite a lot of immunology background. Whilst I feel like you don't necessarily need that to understand cancer immunology, I do think it really helps. So for example, some of the lectures we had did skim over some quite fundamental concepts in immunology, and I feel like if you didn't have that previous knowledge, it may be a bit confusing. I don't know, it's very difficult for me to say because, as I said, I'd done quite a lot of immunology. So those are my 2 modules, and then we also did this smaller module called the research proposal module. We basically had to do this kind of like poster presentation type thing, and that was kind of like the bulk of that. We had like 2 tutorials on this, but it was a very small module, let's say. I realized as part of doing this master's degree that you can still get nervous when you're delivering a presentation through Zoom, like online. I still got really kind of nervous and flustered, and when I'd start talking I'd be kind of stumbling over my words before I got into it. And I thought that would only apply to me doing a presentation in person, but no, sitting in front of a screen still made me nervous. Like, it was crazy. I definitely found that in comparison to the first term, which was really quite intense, when we had loads of mini lectures, we had loads of weekly tasks to do that were uploaded on Moodle, the kind of intensity and the workload, or the number of contact hours, let's say, contact as in online stuff you had to do, because I didn't come into contact with anyone, as we know, but the intensity did decrease. And I'm not saying I was, you know, like sitting here twiddling my thumbs or anything. No, it just gave me more flexibility to do my own reading and to, you know, follow up on the things that I found most interesting. Whereas in the first term it was very structured and really quite regimented. As I talked about in that other video, I was like, you know, those mini lectures that we had, those 20-minute mini lectures, turned into like 2-hour-long lectures because it took so long to do them. But I'm not saying it got easier, it was just, you know, we were working and studying in different ways, as in we were studying more independently. Let's just jump to exams then, because at the start of the second term we did have 2 online multiple choice exams, and they were actually okay. I kind of enjoyed those in a weird way. I was just really quite worried about what it would be like, and I was kind of like stressing about the Wi-Fi crashing, or the Wi-Fi being slow, or my MacBook suddenly playing up, but they were actually okay. That is in contrast to the 24-hour online exam that I sat and have spoken about a few times on my channel and in vlogs and different videos, because I didn't like it personally, and yeah, my whole family didn't like it either. All of those exams were also open book, like you were allowed to use the internet, use your notes, use anything. You just weren't allowed to contact or talk to anyone on the course, basically. The content of that exam was actually not too bad. If I think back to it, it was on cancer and immunology, so I really enjoy that topic. If I had to choose between sitting an exam in like an exam hall versus taking it online, I probably would opt for the in-person exam hall exam. As stressful as they are, I just feel like that's more of an exam for me, as opposed to me being at my desk doing an exam. It's just so weird. But it's an experience, like I've done it, you know? I can say that in my lifetime I took online exams. I don't know who I'm gonna share that information with, you guys, but whatever. Let's now talk about my third term then. Obviously this is when I did my research project. So going into this degree, I kind of thought that I would be doing this project in the lab. I thought I'd be wearing my lab coat, my goggles, I'd be pipetting things, you know, I thought I would be in a lab essentially. However, basically they couldn't offer us lab research projects. As I've said before, like I've had so many signs from the universe that I am just not destined. I don't really know if I believe in destiny, but I'm going to use the word destined to be in a lab and to work as a biology researcher. Obviously it was challenging and I struggled here and there, but I got through it and it was just a really rewarding experience. Yeah, I feel like I was really proud of it. Obviously I don't have my grade for it yet, but I was really happy with what I did, and I was part of a research group basically for about 3 months. So I was part of their like research lab meetings every Thursday, and yeah, like I didn't meet anyone in person, but it was nice to be a part of that, to see what they talk about. A lot of it is, you know, like technical difficulties, things that have gone wrong, because a lot of science is failure before you hit the jackpot, you know? I did a big Q&A about my project in one of my vlogs, which I can link on the screen and down below as well, so that might be useful. But overall I was just so happy with my project title, what I was researching. It was basically like cancer and epigenetics. My supervisors were so amazing and incredibly useful. If you are like a science student and you're offered a data analysis project instead of one in the lab, don't shy away from it and don't think that you're not gonna learn anything from it, because I still learned so much from this data analysis project. Don't diss the data analysis projects, okay? I'm looking at you. They are fun, they can be fun, and especially if you go into it with a positive mindset. So that is the first part of this video about UCL, my second term, and my third term, my research project. And now we're going to move on to this kind of like comparison section. The first thing I'm going to say is, at the end of the day, both of them are amazing institutions and universities. I'm just putting them on a level playing field. Also, I have done a big review of my time at Cambridge. Like, that was a very brutally honest review. So again, I will leave links to that video, and I recently made a video on my second channel, so Biology, where I talked about why you should study biology at Cambridge. So we're gonna start with lectures. In-person lectures versus online lectures, because obviously, yes, the first main difference between my time at Cambridge and my time at UCL was the fact that I was in Cambridge during my undergraduate degree, whereas at UCL I was at my desk. So all of my lectures at UCL were online, they were uploaded. A few of them were live, so they kind of were a bit more like an actual lecture. However, they still did have a recording that was uploaded afterwards. I'm gonna firstly say that I definitely prefer in-person lectures. You just sit there, you listen to the person talking, you look at the screen, and you just make notes. If you miss something, well, you miss something, you know? That was my approach to in-person lectures, and I just liked that atmosphere. Online lectures, it's just not the same. Like, it's just not the same. And you did have to feel very motivated to get those online lectures done, because, you know, if you're thinking about doing this online lecture and it's like an hour long, and you know it's going to end up being 5 hours by the time you've pressed play and pause like a million times, that doesn't sound too appealing to you. Whereas if you have a scheduled lecture, you have to go somewhere, you have to be there, you have that discipline, and you can hold yourself accountable. Whereas with online lectures, it's very easy to be like, no, I'll just leave it to tomorrow, the weekend, I'll do it, and you don't end up doing it. Like, I found myself and I got myself into routines so that I could fall back on that discipline. If I didn't feel motivated, I was like, well, you're still gonna sit there and you're still gonna do that lecture, okay? And also with making notes, obviously when I'd be at Cambridge, I made like handwritten notes, and then I'd kind of like write them up or maybe type them afterwards. And I feel like that kind of process of making notes in the lecture and then writing them up helped to cement that information in my brain, because you had multiple iterations of going through the same material without you kind of even realizing. Whereas with an online lecture, I found like it was harder to absorb the material and remember it, because you're just listening to something on a screen. I feel like you don't have as many cues to use to help you remember things. So for example, like in an in-person lecture, if you remember this particular lecturer that was wearing like a bright colourful blazer, you know, you can associate that lecture with that lecturer's jacket, make that association, and that will help you to remember it. The next thing I want to talk about is basically supervisions at Cambridge versus tutorials at UCL. The supervisions at Cambridge are the same as tutorials at Oxford. It's these intimate academic sessions that you have, and at UCL we had things called tutorials, and this was, again, it was us as students and a person leading the course, basically an academic. However, the main difference was that there were more of us in the tutorial. Now, because it was a master's degree, there still weren't that many of us. In my tutorials, there are about 10 to 12, or maybe sometimes just like 2 of us, depending on whether people wanted to turn up or not. But they were generally bigger than the supervisions I had at Cambridge. And in my first term at UCL, I did talk a lot about the fact that I really enjoyed the tutorials. We were set work to do beforehand, and then we'd talk through these kind of like problems. I thought they were really fun, but the only issue was that they were so awkward on Zoom. And in my experience, the supervisions at Cambridge were awkward, but for a very different reason. I basically had a lot of imposter syndrome in my first year. I was very anxious, and I basically was very shy in supervisions, and to some supervisors that was interpreted as me not understanding things or not being very enthusiastic, when I loved what I was doing and I found it so interesting. I was just incredibly shy, and I felt as if I wasn't worthy of a place there, because I just felt like everyone else knew so much more than me. I definitely warmed up to supervisions by the end of my degree, but the sad thing is that in my third year I didn't have very many supervisions at all, so I didn't really get to prove to myself that, you know, I could be confident in those situations. Whereas at UCL, when it came to these tutorials, I felt pretty confident. You know, we had them on Zoom obviously, and you know, I wasn't afraid about speaking up, saying something potentially wrong, because you know, at the end of the day you learn so much more from saying something wrong and you know, making mistakes. But you know, I felt more confident in these tutorials, but because they were online and on Zoom, not in person, it was just quite awkward because hardly anyone said anything and there were so many awkward silences. The next section is all about assessments, like exams and assignments, how I was basically graded at Cambridge versus UCL again. So I have spoken a bit about this when I was talking about UCL before, but one of the main differences was that at Cambridge, all of my assessments came at the end of each year. My final grade was determined by my third year exams only, and my dissertation obviously, but you know, like that was a lot of pressure. Whereas at UCL I had assessments running throughout my degree. Did you say summative? I feel like summative is the right word to use. And so yeah, I think there are pros and cons to both, and I don't think I have a preference, to be honest with you. Obviously it was strange to me when I first started at UCL that I had like assignments that were going to count towards my final grade as I went along. It was just a new way of being assessed. The thing that stands out to me about UCL in comparison to Cambridge, especially when I think about my third year at Cambridge, as I talked about in my Cambridge review, in my third year I wrote so many essays, and I did submit a lot of them to be marked. However, I often didn't get any feedback, which was kind of frustrating. Whereas at UCL they had very organized marking systems. We were given an assignment brief, we were told about the deadline for us to submit it, and we would be given a date as to when we would expect our marks to be sent out and for us to have received feedback. All of our assessments except one were given back to us on time, and that was so nice. We also had really formal marking sheets, you know, with the grade, how everything was calculated, the breakdown, the feedback. It was just very organized and structured and on it, and I was all for that. Like, it was great. Whereas at Cambridge there wasn't anything really like that. I never saw a mark scheme at Cambridge, like once. And I remember for like my first two assessments at UCL I didn't really pay too much attention to the mark scheme because, as I said, at Cambridge I hadn't seen a mark scheme. But when I did start looking at them, they were actually so useful. I was like, oh, I need to demonstrate that I've done this and this and this to get that grade. The second thing I want to say about UCL and like my masters was that the way we were assessed was very varied and diverse. You know, like, that's my alarm. Alexa, stop. Sorry. I liked the fact that, you know, we'd write an essay for one assessment, we'd take an exam for another, we'd make a poster for this assessment. I just thought that was really fun, and it kept you on your toes, and it meant that it wasn't just like monotonous. Whereas at Cambridge it was like about exams and writing essays, and that was basically it. And this is kind of expected because I was doing a master's degree as opposed to an undergraduate degree. Basically all of my assessments at UCL were focused on like critical analysis, and I can 100% thank Cambridge because my undergraduate, my time spent at Cambridge, gave me the skills and the ability to think in that way. So let's now talk about my dissertation at Cambridge versus my project at UCL. I did my dissertation in my third year at Cambridge. I could have done a research project in the lab, but I basically decided not to do that. I wanted to do a literature-based dissertation instead, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I learned so much from it. I had an amazing supervisor. And then my research project at UCL, as I said, it was a data analysis project. Definitely give this video a thumbs up if you'd like to hear more about my research project in detail, because that is something I said I was going to do. So we need to do that, okay, at some point. But for now, it was about cancer, a rare form of cancer, epigenetics. It was so fun, and I would definitely say that it stretched me more, this data analysis project, because not only did I have to read the literature and, you know, do my background reading and everything, but I had to analyze my own data. I had to think of my own hypotheses, what I was testing, and I had to bring everything together and interpret data. It was just a bigger project, let's say. That is kind of inevitable. Like, I had stepped up from an undergraduate student to being a master's student. You know, you'd expect things to be more challenging. Obviously, I don't know my grade yet, but I feel like I did my best and I put everything into it. The next little section is going to be about extracurricular and social life. The first thing I'm going to say is that for me, going in as a master's student at UCL, making new friends and trying new things, like trying new extracurricular stuff, were not my priorities at all, because I knew that I was signing up to do an online degree, a degree at home. Whereas at Cambridge, I had like that complete university experience. It like surpassed my expectations, we can definitely say, because I studied very intensely, had an amazing social life, I met so many amazing friends, and I danced throughout my whole time at Cambridge. It was like the best of both worlds for me. It was such an amazing experience, and as I said, it was like my ultimate university experience. And so because I'd had that for 3 years, I wasn't so bothered about, you know, going all out with the university experience at UCL. If I had to summarize my experience at Cambridge and then at UCL in like a sentence or something, I would definitely say that at Cambridge I had that, you know, complete university package. I had the academics, the studying side of it, and I also had the social life and the extracurricular stuff. It went above and beyond. It was so much more than I ever expected to get out of that degree. Whereas ECL, like, it wasn't that typical university experience, definitely not, because I did it online. However, it was like a blessing in disguise for me, because I went into it thinking that I wasn't going to be able to do it. I wasn't going to get on with studying at home with my family, you know. I thought I needed to go somewhere to be a student, whereas that wasn't the case. I found a new side of me, and I found balance ultimately. Throughout this master's degree, I have learnt to balance like my life and studying. Yeah, they both taught me so much. The last thing I did just want to touch upon before we finish this video was basically the cost of each degree. So in general, like, education is expensive. So at Cambridge, I was paying 9 grand a year, and then I had my accommodation on top of that and everything else. And the course cost for my master's degree was £15,000 and £50. Why £50? I don't know. I would love to know where that £50 went, which is a lot of money. However, I didn't have to pay as much for accommodation. Like, I wasn't living in London, which would be really expensive. I do pay rent to live at home, but I did save myself money through being at home and not paying to be in London, which is a very expensive city to live in, as we know. The kind of like somewhat political dilemma we could throw into this is that, you know, I did it online, I didn't do it in person. So this will apply to you guys and stuff. Wherever you are in the world studying, you know, there have been debates surrounding, you know, whether students should get a discount because courses have been online instead of in person. Again, I can't really do much to change it. If I really wanted to do this degree, which I did, then I was going to do it, and I can safely say that I'm pretty sure it's worth the 15 grand, you know. Again, I haven't got my grade back. I'm just gonna try not to jinx anything, touch some wood. I really hope that one day academic course fees are reduced, or they're just like waive it entirely, you know, to make it more accessible to more people. But yeah, that was just another thing to throw in at the end. So that is today's video. I really hope you enjoyed it and you found it useful. Definitely give it a thumbs up if you did. Comment down below and subscribe if you are new, and you can hit the bell so you know when I upload as well. I think that's everything for today. As usual, I will speak to you very soon in another video. Bye!